can't see it from here.
Testing, testing. Can everyone hear me out there? All right. Thank you, guys.
ID password. That you don't need a password for the login. Yeah, but if it's asking, Good evening, everyone. We're just giving a few more minutes for people to come into the Zoom room or in person here. So we'll kick off in a couple minutes. Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Sherman Avenue Energy Center public hearing. Oh, thank you. Thank you for stopping me. Good. We're ready. Let's hit it. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. This is Sherman Avenue Energy Center public hearing for the Aegis. Thank you for making it out, those that made it out in person, and for those in Zoom. Currently, right now, we have 2 members of the public in the room and some plant support and some tech support, a court reporter also. And online, we have about 27 people joining us from the public, and it looks like 2 members from the Department of Environmental Protection. So thank you guys all. I know it's evening, it's hard to come away from families, so we appreciate your attendance, and having public input is really important to us. So we're happy to be here at the City Hall tonight, and thank you for the City Hall for hosting it. So we're here tonight to discuss Sherman Avenue Energy Center, the permit renewal for the Title V air permit. Today is October 16th, and I'm Amy Wolf. I've been a Calpine employee. Calpine's the owner-operator of Sherman Avenue Energy Center, and I've been an employee for 10 years. I am in environmental health and safety. I've been leading this team. It's definitely a collaborative team effort to get to tonight. And we have the Aegis, which is the report that's the subject of this hearing. That's the requirement that we need to write this report. We have it available in that white binder if anyone wants to grab it. Or it's available on the New Jersey website as well. So another shout out, I think someone from the NJEJA is here. I just wanted to give you guys a shout out. Thank you. There was a link issue about a week prior to the meeting, and you guys caught it, so we really appreciate your proactive look at that, and we were able to correct it with the DEP, so that was very helpful. Thank you. Kind of saved the day on us. And I'm going to kick this to Alexa. She's going to give us some of the guidelines for how we will move forward with the EJ hearing now.
Thanks, Amy. Let me advance the slide. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. Just want to go over a few guidelines so that the meeting hopefully runs smoothly. From the perspective of everyone's time. So this meeting is being recorded, and by joining today, either online or here in the room, if you make comments, your remarks will be recorded and will be shared publicly. Because following this meeting, both the transcription of the meeting as well as the recording will be posted online. And we have an interpreter who asked to read the guidelines on the slide in Spanish.
My pleasure. Esta reunión se está grabando. Al unirse a la reunión, usted acepta que sus comentarios se graben y se compartan públicamente. Después de la reunión, la grabación y la transcripción estarán disponibles en el Internet.
So if you are participating online and captions would help you, these are the instructions for turning on the captions in Zoom, either in English or if you need the caption in Spanish, you can set to that language.
Si usted quiere enlazarse vía remota y tener las capturas de caption en español, las instrucciones son las siguientes. Haga clic donde dice More, posteriormente Captions, y por último seleccione el lenguaje. Selecciónelo en español si ese es su deseo.
So we have asked that everybody who's in the room to sign in, and we will also be taking note of the people that are participating online. Everyone who wants to will have a chance to make their comments. We just ask that you keep your comments respectful and that you reserve comments till the end of the presentation that's going to be made. The public comment period is going to extend beyond tonight until November 17th, and you can submit written comments up until that time to this email address, which is Sherman Permits, capital S, capital P, @calpine.com. Again, we just ask that after the presentation, you wait until after the presentation before making any comments. And Calpine will respond to all comments that are made during the comment period, including the comments that are made tonight, in a response to comment document that will be submitted to DEP after the public comment period. And DEP will use that as part of their decision-making on the permit. For those who are participating online, we're gonna, again, ask that you use either the chat function, which you can type your question or comment into the chat really at any time, and we'll take those at the end. Or if you prefer to make your comment orally, that you use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and then we will call on you at the appropriate time. I'll turn it back over to Amy.
So just a couple things we're going to go over tonight. So Alexa just spoke about how you can participate and have your voice heard. So again, that's, there's an email address as well if you're not ready to comment tonight. And we'll go through a little bit of the background of environmental justice here in New Jersey. We'll talk about Sherman Avenue Energy Center. We have Paul Osberg here, the plant manager, sitting next to me. We'll go through the Aegis, which is the environmental justice.
Brooksville area intermediate high school, where 1 in 4 students identified as Hispanic.
Sorry about that. The Aegis is the report that was compiled for this for tonight. To it basically reviews the plant and a very in-depth review of the plant, as well as a modeling analysis that we'll also go through tonight, which is the facility-wide modeling results. Our consultant Sharon is here to present those. And then we will, at the final stage, we'll do through some public comments, and everyone will have a chance to speak like we discussed. After that, we'll have closing remarks and next steps, and we'll be live until 8 p.m. tonight. So the environmental, you can turn to the next slide. New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, or the New Jersey DEP, these EJ rules, or environmental justice rules, are newer regulations in Jersey. So we are one of the few first facilities that have been through this process. September 2020, Governor Murphy signed into law the EJA Act, Environmental Justice Act, and this act aims to address the disproportionate environmental and public health impacts of pollution on overburdened communities, or OBCs. OBCs is the acronym for overburdened communities. April 2023, New Jersey DEP, or Department of Environmental Protection, promulgated the EJ rules, or environmental justice rules. These EJ rules establish specific requirements and procedures for certain regulated facilities in the overburdened communities. So we are here tonight to, these rules apply to Sherman Avenue Energy Center's renewal application for its Title V Air Pollution Control permit, which is an air permit. The permit number is BOP 230003. And I just want to stress that there's no changes requested to the operation of the facility or to the facility that are being requested in this permit renewal application. Sherman Avenue Energy Center, thank you. The address there is 2600 Orchard Road in Sherman Avenue in Vineland, Jersey. Their census block is considered an overburdened community. The criteria for an overburdened community is listed there. The reason that their census block is an overburdened community is there's 40% minority group or tribal community or more. So that is what makes the regulations apply to Sherman Avenue. I just wanted to point out some of the ways that we have advertised this public hearing, which sounds like they work since we have a nice show from Zoom and a few people in the room as well. We published the notice in two newspapers, the Daily Journal and the Atlantic City Press. This was 60 days prior to the hearing. We posted signage in front of the facility, bilingual signage, and nice clear signage in front of the facility on that main road there. And we've sent written notices to all property owners and residents within 200 feet of the facility. And we also discussed with Mayor Finucci prior to the hearing. And lastly, and there's other requirements also, but this is kind of how the community has been made aware. So the aegis and the public notice was posted on DEP website, and that's circulated in their email as well. Just wanted to touch upon Calpine. Calpine is the owner-operator of Sherman Avenue Energy Center. Again, I'm an employee of Calpine. They have, you can see on this map, we have covered, we go through 22 states. We are the owner-operator of some natural gas, a lot of natural gas power plants and renewable assets across the states. We also have the Geysers, is a well-known largest geothermal field and complex of geothermal power plants in the world. That's out in California. I'm going to hand this over to Paul Osberg. He'll introduce himself and kind of talk about the power plant.
Good evening. My name is Paul Osberg. I've been with Calpine for 25 years, been in South Jersey for 15 years. I was born and raised in Central Jersey, though everybody tells me there is no such thing. But Sherman Ave went commercial in 1991. It is a peaking unit. It is typically only used in emergency situation where demand is high, grid emergency, or the grid is unstable. It is nominally 96 megawatts, can power about 96,000 homes. It sits on 8 acres of land. The unit is started either locally by our employees or it can be remotely dispatched from Houston. Electricity is generated through a simple cycle process. Calpine is committed to reducing, next slide, if you could change it. Calpine is committed to reducing environmental impacts and being an environmentally good citizen. Calpine has over 287 megawatts of generation capacity in South Jersey across 3 energy centers in the Vineland area here. Cumberland Energy Center is 191 megawatts. Sherman is 92 megawatts, and we have a Vineland solar plant of 4 megawatts, all within the area here. Our New Jersey portfolio utilizes peaking units that don't run frequently, but provide residents with electric service in a reliable fashion, especially during peak demand events. The Sherman Energy Center is staffed by 10 employees locally here. They are shared among the 3 facilities, and 6 are IBEW, International Business Electrical Workers Union, Local 210. Sherman Avenue is comprised of 2 main emission units. A simple cycle combustion turbine. A simple cycle combustion turbine is a big gas turbine directly connected to a generator. Spins at 3,600 RPM, 2 poles, makes electricity, consumes 1,032 MMBTUs per hour, fires natural gas and distillate oil. Capacity is limited to 10%. It's limited by hours of operation in the permit, and it is equipped with water injection for NOx emissions controls into the exhaust stream. And the unit also has continuous emission monitoring unit on it, which measures NOx, CO, and O2, and tracks all our permit limits. The second emission unit we have at Sherman is the compressor engine, which is a natural gas compressor, which takes gas from South Jersey and increases the pressure for burning in the unit. It is limited to 13.6 MMBTUs per hour. It's only for natural gas. It is also limited of hours of operation, 2,500 hours per year, and equipped with selective non-catalytic reduction catalyst. Sherman Energy also has some insignificant emission sources, such as a lube oil tank, 2,000 gallons, a mist limiter, less than 50 pounds per hour throughput, and 2 distillate oil tanks of 750,000 gallon capacity. Service to the community. The plant enhances the reliability and stability of the electrical grid, particularly during high demand and emergency events such as extreme cold weather or extreme hot days. Its ability to respond rapidly to power demand surges to prevent partial disruptions and blackouts. The plant can be started and online, generating power within 45 minutes. It's critical support for emergency preparedness, provides backup power in times of natural disasters and other crises, ensure vital services to hospitals, response centers, and water treatment facilities remain operational.
Thank you, Paul. I'll talk next. Just going to go through a couple of the permits that Sherman Avenue Energy Center has. Again, we're here to talk about the Title V air permit. I mentioned that one, BOP 230003. We are registered with EPA as an acid rain air permit. The ORIS code is, I'm not sure what that stands for exactly, but it's the ORIS code. It's 7288. That's the facility ID in the EPA system. The water physical connection permit, that's for drinking water as well as water injection for NOx or nitrogen oxide control. And the discharge prevention control plan, or DPCC. That's for a plan that prevents oil discharges in New Jersey. It's similar to an SPCC, if anyone has heard of that, the federal version of it. The Title V air pollution control permit. Sherman Avenue Energy Center is deemed a major source of emissions required to obtain a Title V air permit based on its potential to emit for nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxide over the EPA thresholds of 25 tons and 100 tons per year, respectively. Sherman Avenue Energy Center's actual emissions tend to be substantially lower than its permitted potential emissions. Again, similar to what Paul was saying, this plant comes online when we really need it most in the grid, and it keeps the grid stable. It's also required to demonstrate its capacity to meet its PJM, or the grid operator requirement, and it's called upon to operate as needed as a peaking facility. So again, it comes online quickly and when we need it most. This is a chart of the potential emissions on the first line, and it might be hard to see except for the people in Zoom. But we're very far from emitting, our potential to emit. Again, it's a vital source for the grid that, we run, about 400 hours of the year on average in the last few years. I'm going to pass this over to Sharon, who will introduce herself. She'll go through the Aegis and the facility-wide modeling. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gill. I'm an environmental consultant with Ambient Air Quality Services. I helped write the environmental justice impact statement and did the modeling for the Aegis as well. So the big meat of the Aegis is looking at adverse cumulative environmental stressors to the overburdened community. The first step is really to do an initial screening for those community stressors. There are several categories of those stressors, which include air pollution, contaminated sites that may be in the community, transfer stations or other solid waste facilities, recycling or scrap metal facilities, point sources of water pollution, potential health impacts, density or proximity stressors, and social determinants of health, which include education and employment or unemployment. There are 26 community stressors that are called out that need to be addressed in an aegis, and the community in which Sherman Avenue is has 19 of those 26 community stressors. Now, we do want to stress that Sherman Avenue Energy did not create these stressors, though we may minimally contribute to existing cumulative stressors, but we do use all feasible mitigation measures, and no additional contribution to stressors will result from this permit renewal. All right, another part of the aegis is a facility-wide risk assessment. This is required by the environmental justice law. This estimates the probability of adverse health effects from exposure to hazardous substances and looks at the long and short-term effects of exposure from these particular compounds. The air toxics that New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, they have a specific list of compounds that you need to address if you emit them. And then you really need to look at ones that are above the reportable quantity. So the first step in this risk assessment is to do a risk screening worksheet. This is a worksheet that is put together by New Jersey DEP. It is very conservative. And it uses unit risk factors and reference concentrations to see if there is any risk to adverse health effects. So you put these numbers into the risk screening worksheet. If everything passes, then you're good to go. Some compounds may need further analysis, in which case you would go on to the second step, which is the facility-wide risk assessment that requires dispersion modeling. So before we do that dispersion modeling, we have to do a protocol. That protocol is written according to New Jersey Technical Manual 1002, which is the technical manual for doing a modeling protocol. So we wrote a protocol, had it approved, so then we went on to the modeling. Sherman Avenue had 8 compounds that needed further analysis. These are arsenic, cadmium, formaldehyde, lead, manganese, nickel and compounds, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, or PA, which we use benzo-A-pyrene as a surrogate, and acrolein. The 2 main sources at Sherman Avenue, if they emitted those compounds, were included in the modeling, so that includes both the combustion turbine, which is Unit 1, and the compressor engine, which is Unit 2. We used AirMod, which is an EPA-approved dispersion model, and we used the latest version of that. The model takes meteorological data, and we got that data set from New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. They process it, which saves time. The surface station that we used was Atlantic City Airport, and the upper air data was from Brookhaven, New York Airport for the years of 2017 through 2021, which was the latest data set that NJDEP has processed. You can run the model in either rural or urban mode. We ran it in rural mode, and the way we determined that is by doing both a land use analysis and a population density analysis. For the land use analysis, we look within 3 kilometers surrounding the facility, looking at land use data from USGS, so government data. The result of that analysis was the area is 83.6% rural. And then the population density analysis uses census data, and the community is 319 people per square kilometer, Whereas, so that would be rural, urban designation is 750 people per square kilometer. So both determinants indicated rural mode, so that's what the model was run in. We also used flat terrain, which is recommended by NJDEP Technical Manual 1003, which is the manual that tells you how to do a risk assessment. To run the model, we need to create a receptor grid, which is basically a virtual net of points where maximum downwind concentrations are calculated, or downwind concentrations are calculated, and then one of those points will pick up the maximum in the whole grid. So as you can see in the very center of that yellow square, it looks pretty solid in there. The receptors are much closer together at the facility, and then they get spaced wider apart. Oh, she changed. Okay. All right. We also look at sensitive receptors in addition to just that grid. Sensitive receptors are areas where we're really concerned about the risk to people. So this would include hospitals, schools, residential areas, parks, that sort of thing. So these were all of the sensitive receptors within 5 kilometers of Sherman Avenue Energy Center. So those were added to the receptor grid as discrete receptors. So not only did we look at receptors in that grid, but we also looked at these sensitive receptors too. So once we run the model, we get a maximum downwind concentration in microgram per cubic meter. And using that concentration, we can calculate a hazard quotient or an incremental risk, depending on if a compound could possibly cause cancer, which is carcinogenic, or a non-carcinogenic compound. So hazard quotients are for non-carcinogenic compounds. When we calculate that number, we want to make sure that we are less than or equal to 1 on a pollutant basis to demonstrate negligible risk. And cancer risks need to be less than or equal to 1 times 10 to the minus 5, which is 10 in 1 million on a pollutant basis. So the results for the non-carcinogenic risk results, basically all of the pollutants that have a health quotient for short term all showed negligible risk. The hazard quotient was less than 1. And for long term was the same. For carcinogenic risk results, cancer risks are only long term because it's for long term exposure. These are the compounds that are carcinogens, and they all showed less than 10 in 1 million risk. So the takeaway is that all of our reportable compounds demonstrated negligible risk for adverse health effects across the receptor grid and including those sensitive receptors. Moving on to the technical feasibility analysis. So another part of the EJ law requires this analysis for all equipment or control apparatus that have 3 criteria. Was installed at least 20 years prior to the expiration date of the current effective operating permit, was not subject to review under the environmental justice law in the 15 years prior to the expiration of the current permit, and has a total emissions of particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in size, nitrogen oxides or NOx, and volatile organic compounds that comprise at least 20% of the overall potential emissions. So given those 3 criteria, these are the 2 pieces of equipment at Sherman Avenue. And of the 2 pieces of equipment, only the combustion turbine met all 3 criteria to have a technical feasibility analysis, because the combustion turbine comprises 90% of the PM 2.5 emissions, 98% of the NOx emissions, and 97% of VOC. So in performing the technical feasibility analysis for the combustion turbine, we use a top-down approach. So the first step is you, on a pollutant-pollutant basis, identify all the potential control technologies that could be used to control that pollutant. You then rank the control technologies by control effectiveness. And then step 3 is you determine the feasibility of the control technologies by determining, number 1, is it actually technically feasible for that piece of equipment? And then if it's technically feasible, then you go to the next step. Is it environmentally feasible? Then, is it economically feasible? And then at the end, if it's yes, 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 then you go to energy feasibility. If that's a yes, then you're required to use that control technology. So the results of this analysis was that water injection was found to be feasible for NOx control and monitoring. For volatile organic compound control, good combustion practices, which includes proper mixing of the fuel and air to make sure you have the most efficient combustion, and maintaining high combustion temperatures to make sure you get complete oxidation of those volatile organic compounds. For PM 2.5 control, combustion of clean fuels and good combustion practices was the feasible control technology. We also have additional limits on operating capacity just by virtue of the status that this is a peaking facility, and we also do have limited hours of operation. And these methods were selected because they offer strong environmental performance, they align with the facility operations, and are the most cost-effective with minimal environmental byproducts.
I think we're back to now just about to start the comment section of the meeting. Again, we just want to remind everybody that the comment period will extend for another 30 days till November 17th. And if you don't make a comment tonight and you still want to make one, you're free to submit in writing to this email address. Again, Sherman Permits, capital S, capital P, @calpine.com. Our purpose here tonight is to hear from the community and to take all your comments. But we might not respond to all comments tonight, but your comments will be responded to in the response to comment document that will be submitted to DEP after the public comment period ends. And of course, if you have any questions that you need clarification about what's been presented or what's in the aegis, we will try to answer that so that you have a clear understanding of the information that's being provided. And again, all the comments and our responses to the comments will become publicly available, so you will see all of that. And if our translator could give this information.
Del público. El periodo de comentarios públicos finaliza el 17 de noviembre del 2025. Puede enviar sus comentarios por escrito a Sherman Permits, Sherman S mayúscula y Permits P mayúscula, @ calpine.com. El propósito de esta audiencia es recibir comentarios de la comunidad para responderlos en la respuesta a los comentarios. Sin embargo, nos esforzaremos a responder a las preguntas para garantizar una comprensión clara de la información proporcionada. Documentaremos todos los comentarios recibidos y proporcionaremos una respuesta a NJDEP o NJDEP que estará disponible públicamente.
Okay, and just to reiterate, if you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, please feel free to use the chat box to type in your comment. If you'd like to make an oral comment, if you click the raise your hand feature under the React button, we will call on you to make a comment. And if you're in person and you would like to make a comment, we're going to ask that you step up to the podium to make your comments. We ask that all commenters state your name, first name, and please spell your last name and your first name also, because we are creating a transcript of this hearing, your address and affiliation, if any. Because we have a number of people online and in the room, we're going to ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes so that everybody who wants to speak can speak. You know, we're just not going to be able to allow video sharing for those on Zoom, but you can unmute yourself, or we'll unmute you at the right time to make a comment. And again, we just ask that everybody keep their comments respectful. And we do appreciate everybody's time and participation here tonight. So Sarah?
Puede comentar, 1. Levanta la mano en el botón reaccionar de Zoom o usando la función de preguntas y respuestas del chat. En persona, por favor, forme fila en el podio. Debe indicar su nombre, dirección y afiliación si la tiene, para que conste antes de hacer preguntas o comentar. Tendrá un límite de 3 minutos para poder darle la oportunidad a todos los que deseen hablar. No se permitirá compartir la pantalla por video. Y no se tolerará lenguaje ofensivo, discriminatorio ni provocativo.
Sorry, yep. So we have, at the moment, 6 people with their hands raised, and at least 1 person in the room. Would you like to start, sir? Thank you. If you would come up to the podium. And if you would just state your name and spell it, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Keep track of my. So my name is Nikki Sheets. I work at Princeton University, where I'm a senior policy fellow and lecturer. It's actually Dr. Nikki Sheets. I don't use the title that much, but I guess it's appropriate for public hearing. But I'm not representing Princeton tonight. I'm actually representing the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance as a volunteer tonight. And the Alliance, or NJEJA, played an important role in actually developing the New Jersey EJ law. And we intend and hope to play an important role in seeing how it's implemented. Because we're just, as much as possible, we want to make sure it is implemented, that the rules are implemented in alignment with the spirit of the law and in a way that's most protective of New Jersey residents, especially in overburdened communities. The law defines, and we would call them environmental justice communities, communities of low income, and communities of color. And so I'll jump right into it. While the aegis was well done, we don't think it's protective enough of the residents of the overburdened community near Calpine. Let me tell you why. Well, one reason why, and my other colleagues will make comments also, but it seems from reading the aegis that Calpine takes a position that it only needs to address possible additional air pollution emissions that will result from a renewal of the permit. And our reading of the law and the rules, and according to the intent of the law, is that yes, Calpine needs to address any additional emissions that will result from permit renewal, but it also needs to look at existing emissions and also take steps to reduce those. And that's where we think the aegis falls short. And I won't, due to time limitations, I had quotes from the rules, but I won't. I'll just say that. We'll put it in our written comments. I won't quote from the rule. But to us, when we read the rule, it's pretty clear that it's talking about current emissions as well as additional emissions. And we think this interpretation also fits with the intent of the law. I mean, the intent of the law is to address and protect those communities, address pollution in those communities that have been designated as overburdened, and not only overburdened as the definition of the law, but then also has higher levels of pollution than other communities in New Jersey. And the law protects these communities, we think, in two ways. First, it says that under certain circumstances, if you're asking for a new pollution permit in one of these overburdened communities, if you're going to add to the pollution, you're not going to get the permit, right? That permit application shall be denied. So that takes care of new sources, but how about the existing pollution? How are you going to lower the pollution in these communities that have already been found to have too much pollution, too much existing pollution? And we're not talking about any additional, that would just add to the pollution problem. Well, the way to address that existing pollution is upon permit renewal to look at what steps can be taken by whatever facility is to reduce its current level of emissions. And that's where we think the aegis falls short. Let me just give you one example. My colleagues will give you other examples. For example, you mentioned the NOx emissions. And there is a mechanism laid out in the aegis, I think I'm reading it right, that will reduce NOx emissions even more than in water injection that you mentioned. For example, SCR, selective catalytic reduction. If I remember correctly, this mechanism could reduce NOx emissions by somewhere between 96 to 114 tons per year. But the aegis doesn't recommend it because it says it's economically infeasible. And our reading, I'm getting ready to knock myself out here. Our reading of the aegis, when we read it, we think the explanation of why that mechanism is declared economically infeasible really falls short, because it doesn't talk, it lays out how many tons of pollution will be reduced, what the cost is, and then just says, well, due to cost, it's economically infeasible. Doesn't set a standard, doesn't say what cost would be economically feasible, doesn't discuss doesn't discuss the merits of, well, it's reducing this much pollution, but it costs this much. That discussion is absent. And there are other things that my colleagues will suggest, other mechanisms we think that could be incorporated into the operations of Calpine that would reduce pollution emissions. And we hope that Calpine would embrace some of the things we're saying, for example, using SCR, or there was another mechanism that was discussed in aegis that seemed to be as effective in reducing NOx as SCR, but that was also said to be economically infeasible. So we think that should be incorporated, that mechanism should be incorporated into the operations of Calpine, and other things that you'll hear my colleagues talk about. We hope Calpine would embrace that, but if Calpine doesn't, we don't want to be argumentative, but we would ask DEP to impose those as conditions of the permit. And I'll just say, in ending, I'll say, remember the purpose of the law. Again, it's to reduce pollution in those communities that already have too much pollution, and in vulnerable communities that are particularly vulnerable to pollution. And the reason it wants to reduce pollution is obvious, but I'll just state it, for the health of those residents. Because pollution is harming the health of residents, it's killing residents, and the more we can reduce pollution, the healthier those residents will be. So we will go into more detail on the written comments. And I wasn't going to say this, but I'll just say this quickly. With the risk assessment, and I must admit I haven't read the risk assessment document from DEP in a while, so I didn't focus on that. Maybe we'll go back and take a longer look. And you're doing what DEP says, so I'm not blaming this on Calpine. That's an adjustment I should have made. Thank you. I'm not blaming this on Calpine because you're following, whatever DEP says in methodology. But you said it yourself. It's a pollutant by pollutant approach. And it doesn't take into account, it's not a cumulative risk assessment. It doesn't take into account when these pollutants mix, what's the overall risk assessment of the pollutants when you take them cumulatively, because that's how we're experiencing them. That's how the residents are experiencing them. They're not experiencing them one at a time. Right? You breathe in air pollution, you breathe it all in. It doesn't go into your compartments in the lungs. So, and in fact, that's one reason why the New Jersey EJ law was developed, trying to come up with some kind of cumulative assessment. How do we deal with the cumulative impact of pollutants? So thank you very much for listening, and we will submit written comments, and more of my colleagues will be talking about other mechanisms to reduce pollution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. I think we'll turn to some of the online commenters. So, Mr. Voos, ask you to.
Thank you. I have unmuted myself. My name is Keith Voos. I am, you wanted me to spell that name. The name Keith is spelled Keith. The name Voos is spelled V as in Valentine, OOS as in Sam. I am the chair of the New Jersey NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I happen to live in North Brunswick, New Jersey, but as stated, my committee's responsibilities are statewide. The NAACP's interest in this Title V air pollution renewal request consists of the fact that Calpine's facility lies in a census tract that is approximately 63% minority. The NAACP strives to see that the environmental justice law is applied with maximum feasible strength in all contexts, maximum feasible strength. And we do so given the long and egregious history of the unjust and inequitable access to the human and civil rights to which non-minority citizens have consistently had easier access. It should go without saying that a healthy environment, consisting, among other things, of healthy water, healthy soil, and healthy air, is a vital element in those civil and human rights. So, for the environmental justice law to be applied in this case with maximum feasible strength, the NAACP feels that the addition of battery storage technology to Calpine's operation is a measure that would assure a future operation that stands against the possibility of ever contributing any additional cumulative stressors or pollutants to a census tract that is already overburdened by such stressors. Others who will be making public comments this evening will go into much greater technical detail about that recommendation. But since I'm the first person to mention it after Dr. Sheets, I need to let you know that there will be additional comment on that matter. Calpine would avoid PGM restraints if it used its existing interconnection service under PGM's surplus interconnection service program. In addition, this measure, the addition of battery storage capacity, would help Calpine to meet the DEP's upcoming emissions limit that goes into effect in June 2027. This is a new limit, and June 2027 is less than 2 years away. This has been promulgated by the DEP under its electricity generating unit rule. At this time, Calpine has not indicated that it is taking any other measures to meet that future limit under the EGU rule. This hearing, however, the public testimony that will be provided this evening will be providing excellent input to Calpine in regard to a path toward compliance with that rule, which will provide vital safeguards to Calpine's minority neighbors, as well as to all of its neighbors, regardless of their demographics. Thank you for giving me time to speak this evening.
Thank you for your comment. Rodriguez, ask you to unmute.
Hello, thanks for having me, allow me to speak. Good evening, my name is Christian Rodriguez. Christian is spelled Chrisistien, Rodriguez is Rodriguez. My pronouns are they, them, and I live in Newark, which is an environmentally overburdened community, much like Vineland. My family has experienced, the very real health costs of cumulative pollution, childhood asthma, frequent headaches, and respiratory flare-ups, especially on bad air days. We don't breathe averages. We live with layer burdens every day. Vineland, the community before you tonight, qualifies as an OBC, right? You mentioned in your aegis, it has a stress score of 19, higher than the state and county 50th percentile, and is marked adverse across numerous indicators, such as ground level ozone, cancer risk from diesel and other air toxics, heavy traffic, contaminated sites, water concerns, the list goes on. That is Vineland's, baseline. And it somewhat mirrors what many of us in Newark face. Calpine's aegis states that the facility minimally contributes and that this permit renewal adds no additional contribution. But under New Jersey's EJ laws and rules, in an OBC, not making it worse is not enough, especially when you're emitting arsenic, formaldehyde, and lead, to name a few, and when you take those into account cumulatively. Where it is feasible, facilities should and must reduce current emissions. I'm not going to go into some of the feasible steps to consider. Mr. Voos mentioned a few of them. The only other ones that I was thinking that you can also try to implement is to eliminate your distillate oil, transition to gas-only operations at minimum. The New Jersey Department of Health warns that distillate oil can irritate and burn skin and eyes, impact the nervous system, cause dizziness, nausea, loss of coordination, and affect the liver and kidneys. And in communities like Vineland, and any communities like Vineland or Newark should not shoulder these avoidable risks, right? We want you to also try to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, and then take accountability and transparency. So as someone from Newark who understands these cumulative harms firsthand, I ask why Calpine will want to continue jeopardizing the youth in this area, especially since the facility is surrounded by a college, an elementary school, and a daycare center. These folks in these facilities, they definitely deserve a real chance to thrive, especially when operation is 24 hours, which equals to about 104 days if we calculate this on a 24-hour time frame. That's a lot of days if you ask me. So I asked the DEP, I respectfully urge the DEP to conditions this Title V renewal on enforceable requirements. As Mr. Voss mentioned, or Vuz mentioned, short-term battery storage hybridization plan with clear milestones, removal of distillate oil, a detailed operations plan to meet the 2027 greenhouse gas limits, and real-time reporting with community oversight. Overburdened communities across New Jersey are watching. So please require Calpine to lessen the burden, not just maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. The next commenter is Abhi Ramanan.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Abhi Ramanan. That's Abbe. last name Raman. I'm a project director with Clean Energy Group. We're a national nonprofit. This testimony is informed by CAG's work through our Phase Out Peakers initiative, which is a first of its kind project focused on accelerating the retirement of fossil fuel peaker plants and their replacement with energy storage, renewable generation, and other non-emissions alternatives. Based on our analysis of the Sherman Ave plant, we believe the site is a prime candidate for hybridization with battery storage, and we would encourage DEP to impose a special condition requiring Calpine to develop at minimum a 90 megawatt, 720 megawatt hour battery storage system at the site as a condition of renewing its Title V permit. This recommendation was based on a few key factors in our analysis. The first is technical feasibility. Based on our analysis of the plant's runtime over the last 5 years, the plant's gross load output per hour does not typically exceed more than 90 megawatts, and it's often significantly less. On average, the plant operated for events of a duration, under a duration of 4 hours for 41.6% of the time, for events between 4 and 12 hours, 51.6% of the time, and for events greater than 12 hours, only 6.8% of the time. Based on this analysis, there are a variety of hybridization options using batteries at the site, which would cost effectively and dramatically reduce emissions while still meeting almost all events at which the plant would be called upon. For example, a 90 megawatt battery storage installation using 8-hour lithium-ion batteries would cover about 82% of total events. A 12-hour installation at Sherman Ave would be able to meet over 90% of events. In both scenarios, the existing combustion unit would only need to come on for infrequent, longer duration events. While there may be some space constraints limiting battery development within the original 5.52 acre footprint of the site, analysis conducted on the feasibility of large-scale battery storage development in high-density areas such as New York City has found that 4-hour duration storage projects can have a density of 23 to 30 megawatts per acre or up to 40 megawatts under certain conditions. Furthermore, while Calpine has stated in their environmental justice statement that battery storage hybridization will be infeasible at the site due to requiring a new interconnection study from PJM, if the batteries are designed to utilize the facility's existing interconnection service while preserving the same total rated capacity at the point of interconnection, the batteries can be interconnected under PJM surplus interconnection service, as has been mentioned by earlier commenters. It is very clear that hybridization with battery storage is the most cost-effective way to significantly reduce emissions of the plant, particularly nitrogen oxides. Based on the plant's last 5 years of generation and emissions data, the installation of a 90 megawatt, 180 megawatt hour battery storage system would reduce emissions from the site by 73%. A system using 8-hour batteries would reduce emissions by 55%, and even using 4-hour batteries would still address about 41% of the times the plant is called upon. And those shorter duration events are some of the most polluting from a local emission standpoint, as emissions are typically unabated during startup and shutdown. So by reducing the need for the plant to come on during these shorter duration events, a system using 4-hour batteries would still reduce emissions by about 16%. These emissions reductions are particularly pertinent given that, based on Calpine's own survey of community stressors, the Vineland community currently experiences significant adverse stress from ground level ozone, even with the use of existing emissions abatement systems. Hybridization is also fairly cost effective. Based on NREL's most recent advanced technology baseline data, a typical 4-hour utility scale installation would cost approximately $1,551 per kilowatt, while an 8-hour installation would cost approximately $2,799 per kilowatt. These costs are not unreasonable, particularly given the significant impact on local air pollution emissions even a 4-hour battery storage installation would have. Hybridization would only be effective if there are additional special conditions put into consideration, including requiring that the site be configured so that the batteries are called upon first and that the combustion unit is only turned on for events that are longer than the battery system's available duration. This configuration would also take advantage of the quick response grid services batteries have, which includes no RAM time, not even 45 minutes, and batteries are also already synced to the grid, and they can provide things that a gas turbine cannot. The batteries can also charge during periods of high renewable energy production, helping to minimize curtailment of those resources and reducing any potential embodied emissions from grid charging of the batteries. We appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony, and we'll be submitting more extensive written comments and welcome further discussion from DEP and Calpine. Thank you.
Thank you. Next commenter online is Yukian Lam.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name is Yukyan Lam, spelled Y-U-K-Y-A-N, last name Lam, L-A-M. And I'm the Senior Scientist and Director of Research at the Tishman Environment and Design Center at the New School. I'd like to focus my time here tonight to call upon NJDEP to impose conditions on Calpine's Sherman Avenue Energy Center renewal that are necessary to avoid and minimize the facility's contributions to stressors in the OBC of Vineland, New Jersey. Calpine has noted in its aegis that the Sherman Avenue facility is not a major contributor to burdens in the community, but this is irrelevant. Data from NJDEP show that the community is adverse for the 21 or 19, depending how you look at it, out of the 26 stressors analyzed under the EJ law and rule. Calpine has also noted that no additional contribution to stressors will result from the renewal, and they even emphasize that again here tonight in their presentation, saying that there are no changes to the operation or facility that are being requested. However, we believe that this is separate from their obligation to reduce the facility's overall contributions, including from their ongoing operations as they stand. The provisions under the EJ rule on avoidance of disproportionate impact for renewals speak directly to this point. Under these provisions, I'm looking at 8.2, applicants are supposed to analyze and propose feasible control measures necessary to avoid facility contributions to all adverse stressors in the OBC. The facility's ongoing operations are plainly part of the facility's contributions. The EJ rule states, moreover, that if disproportionate impact can't be avoided with a renewal, then DEP shall impose conditions on that renewal. In the provision 8.2 on avoidance of disproportionate impact, it's noted that these obligations are in fact additional to the obligations under the EJ rule that pertain to the risk assessment and the technical feasibility analysis. Now, part 9.1 in the EJ rule does impose certain parameters on how DEP will arrive at its decision. And this includes DEP considering public input, the aegis, applicant's response to comments, and other supplemental information. But importantly, 9.1 also notes that DEP is supposed to do its own evaluation and determination of feasibility on the conditions for the facility's operation, including control measures that were considered under the technical feasibility analysis. However, also including other measures, they're not limited to looking at the conditions that the applicant itself proposed. So drawing on these legal obligations, we want to call upon DEP to really take a careful look at the aegis. First, control measures were not considered adequately in the aegis. Calpine did not consider pollution controls to reduce emissions to the maximum extent technically feasible. It did not, as required by the rule, evaluate the incremental costs and relative benefits of the control options that it presented for pollution control. In another insufficiency, key equipment in the Calpine facility, such as its combustion engine, were also not examined and should have been. So we really want to call upon DEP to re-examine these parts of the aegis carefully. Second, there are other potential controls beyond those that Calpine named in its aegis that we want DEP to strongly consider. And these alternatives, which include the battery storage just mentioned by the previous commenter, would go a long way toward avoiding and minimizing Calpine's contributions to stressors in the community. So in sum, if Calpine proceeds as planned under its aegis, we do not believe that it will have met its obligation to implement measures to avoid or minimize contributions to stressors, and it's now up to DEP to exercise its authority, and we call upon DEP to impose those conditions that would ensure that impacts to the community from this air permit renewal would be avoided and minimized. Calpine tonight claims that it has not created the situation of adverse cumulative stressors, but this is just simply irrelevant. The EJ law does not let facilities off the hook from considering their contributions based on an excuse that they are not responsible for creating the situation or that they are not a major contributor. Under the law and in furthering its intent, all facilities contributing to the situation have to be fully scrutinized for the contributions. And this is what we hope that NJDEP will do in this now third decision under the EJ law. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Next commenter online, Brooke Helmick.
Yes, thank you. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Brooke Helmick, that's spelled Brooke, last name Helmick, Helmick. And I have the privilege to serve as the Director of Policy for the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, also known as NJEJA, from whom you already heard Dr. Nikki Sheets speak. We are a statewide organization with connections in North, Central, and South Jersey, and for over 20 years, we have supported community organizations and residents in realizing their right to clean air, land, and water. A central guiding mission to our work has focused on requiring emissions reductions from facilities located across the state, but particularly in overburdened communities, which we often refer to as environmental justice communities. As you heard from Dr. Sheets, NJEJA was also a key member of the coalition, which worked to support and pass the environmental justice law. So this work has deep importance to us. And to that end, I'm here today to offer our guidance and expertise to the team at Calpine and at the DEP to implement the best practices which can guarantee emissions reductions in the overburdened communities surrounding the Calpine facility and the greater Vineland area. We do recognize that it was both stated at the start of this meeting and in the aegis that this permit does not bring on any additional contributions to environmental stressors, and no changes were requested in the permit. However, as you heard from my colleague Yukyan, not adding any additional stressors doesn't mean that Calpine does not have a responsibility to decrease its emissions from where they are currently at, which we often will talk about as the baseline emissions. This is both in the letter and the spirit of the EJ law. Additionally, it was emphasized throughout the presentation that the facility is emitting lower than its currently permitted potential to emit. Now, as a renewal, Calpine must, according to the rules, quote, analyze and propose feasible control measures necessary to avoid facility contributions to all adverse environmental and public health stressors in the overburdened community. To this end, my comments will reflect what my colleagues have said and will say in the remainder of the public comment period. As a peaker plant, we recognize that Calpine plays an important role in ensuring reliability and providing additional power. However, we are resolute in our belief that providing this additional power and stability cannot come at the cost of the local community, especially their local air quality and overall public health. Peaker plants which burn traditional fossil fuels, in the case of Calpine, natural gas and distillate oil, are by their very nature extremely dirty. And repeatedly, the presentation has emphasized that Calpine is a minimal contributor. However, as you've heard from other speakers, any contribution to toxic air emissions and negative public health outcomes is something that must be addressed. I have more I can say on this, but for the sake of time, I'll skip forward and we'll address more of that in our written comments. But I do want to highlight a report from the American Lung Association, which adds that, quote, an adverse impact from pollution from the transportation and electricity generation sectors are clear and must be recognized as a threat to local community health, health equity, and a driver of major climate change related health risks. As many in this room believe, we do not accept the status quo emissions as something we cannot change or as insurmountable challenges. And quite the contrary, there are feasible, technically viable solutions that Calpine can implement and DEP can require as part of the EJ conditions on the permit, which will guarantee emissions. Much like my colleague Abby said, we strongly recommend the implementation of on-site battery storage. And to this end, we also recommend, in order to support the charging of the on-site battery storage with clean energy and not contributing to additional strain on the grid, we believe it's feasible to implement and install on-site solar to support this battery storage. By implementing these recommendations, this will decrease the facility's emissions from their existing levels and support the deployment of clean energy in line with the state's clean energy goals and what we need to do in order to decrease local air emissions and combat climate change. So in doing so, Calpine will live up to their word in the presentation that all emissions mitigation measures are actually utilized. Additionally, and which will be addressed in our written comments, we have 3 other feasible, specific, and easily achievable recommendations, which is first, in tandem with hybridization, Calpine must remove the usage of distillate oil from the facility operations. Number 2, require that all continuous emissions monitoring data be made publicly available for community review and community scientists to work with. And 3, implement systems for accountability and transparency in the idling reduction policies, which Calpine outlines in its aegis. All of these thoughts, as well as the others that we have decided to share in long-form written comment, will be submitted by the deadline, and we thank you for the opportunity to engage in this hearing, and we welcome further comments and ongoing discussions on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so if, when you're making your statement, if you could slow down a little bit for the court reporter to take down your comments, that would be great. Next online commenter is Colin Parts.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi there, my name is Colin Parts. That's Colin, last name P-A-R-T as in Thomas S. And I'm an associate attorney with Earth Justice. I'm here today virtually to ask that Calpine take into account its existing and ongoing impacts on the sensitive populations that are right nearby the facility and implement better emissions control technologies to eliminate those impacts. The Calpine facility is located very close to facilities like hospitals, schools, and residences, which means that every time it turns on, the people at those facilities are exposed to a variety of health-harming pollutants that we heard about today. The Inspira Medical Center Vineland and Weissman Children's Medical Daycare and Outpatient Rehab Center are both within a mile of the facility. So that means potentially vulnerable patients and children are exposed to Calpine's emissions whenever it runs. The Cumberland Christian School and Rowan University Cumberland campus are within a half mile of the facility, and the Aegis tells us that the closest residence is only 0.14 miles away, which is basically a half a lap around a track. Calpine should take into account the burden its emissions pose on the people right by its facility, and it should implement the best possible emissions control technology, switching or hybridizing from fossil fuel to battery power. Shifting to battery power would allow Calpine to cut the emissions from its fossil fuel power plant while still allowing it to respond in real time when demand for electric power is high. Battery power is a feasible and reliable way to reduce its emissions, as you heard today, and Calpine wrongly dismisses this key opportunity to reduce the burden its emissions impose on the people nearby its facility. Calpine's Environmental Justice Impact Statement, or EJIS, admits that it has to make major changes to its facility in order to comply with the new greenhouse gas emissions limits that come into effect in 2027. There's an answer. Battery storage is the best method for Calpine to meet those limits. And in addition to adding battery storage, Calpine should at the very least implement stronger emissions control technologies than those that are currently in place. In its Aegis, Calpine itself admits that selective catalytic reduction would be the most effective NOx control technology, but at the same time, it makes the unexplained assumption that the EGU rules implementation in 2027 would somehow mean that Calpine would only be able to use the SCR system for 3 years, which it argues makes SCR infeasible. Similarly, Calpine admits that use of an oxidation catalyst would be the most effective VOC control technology, but uses the same assumption about the EGU rule without explaining as a way to claim that the oxidation catalyst would be infeasible. All of that means that Calpine admits that there are better technologies to protect people's health than its current approach, but it turns around and uses unexplained assumptions about the technology's useful life to claim it can't feasibly protect people's health better. Rather than relying on these assumptions, Calpine should take into account the people nearby who are exposed to its pollution every time it runs and re-examine the feasibility of the control technologies it admits would better protect people's health. Thank you.
Thank you. Next online commenter is Doug O'Malley.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll just start off by spelling my name, Doug, D-O-U-G, O'Malley, O''M-A-L-L-E-Y. I serve as the Director for Environment New Jersey. We represent more than 80,000 citizen members and activists across the state. And I wanted to start my comments by really thanking my previous commenters and the work of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, including Brooke Helmick and Dr. Sheets, as well as the commenters we've heard from Earth Justice, as well as commenters to come from a multitude of other organizations. I also serve as a steering committee for Empower New Jersey, which represents more than 100 groups across the state working to reduce and ultimately stop new fossil fuel infrastructure across New Jersey. I wanted to focus my comments, and there's a lot to say here, and we've already heard a lot even in the short time, but I wanted to focus my comments on a couple things. But one, obviously, on the EJ law itself. So with the EJ law is part of the reason we're having this hearing in the first place. And this is a critical moment of accountability, not only for Calpine to explain the permit, but also for the DEP. Because Title V air permits historically have been rubber stamped. And obviously the whole concept of Title V and the Clean Air Act itself is to use best available technology to be able to reduce emissions. It's not to rubber stamp and continue to have emissions that continue at similar levels decade after decade after decade. And that honestly should be the driving, that intent, and also using best available technology, which is also a key component of the Clean Air Act, is another key component here. And this facility, while it might not be ancient, certainly is not new. It is from the last century. It is more than 30 years old. It's essentially from the same era as Milli Vanilli and Vanilla Ice, and when the Soviet Union fell. This is not a modern facility as we would consider it. And in terms of, and I really appreciate the work of Earth Justice in documenting the multiple, not just residences, but community centers, medical facilities, schools surrounding the facility. Those communities are at risk. The 400 hours that were cited, that is not an insignificant amount of time. That's nearly 3 weeks. And that 400 hours is not in the dead of winter. It's historically on the hottest summer days when ground level ozone is one of the largest threats to communities that are overburdened. This is an overburdened community, and it is imperative upon the facility to be looking at providing real-time air monitoring data, because that will show the risk that is provided to the overburdened community. I think it's also just critical to note, too, that we are in a moment, as I think all of us know from looking at our utility bills, of utility rate shock. This facility itself is permitted to run much longer than it does. That is a huge risk because there's a likelihood that it will run more. And that means obviously more pollution in downtown Vineland and across South Jersey. That's a huge issue. It's also a huge issue for ratepayers because facilities like the Calpine peaker plant are some of the most expensive energy that you can spend as part of the PJM capacity auction. That's not only a bad deal for ratepayers, but it's also ignoring one of the solutions that was not available in 1991, and that's obviously energy storage. And we've heard multiple references to energy storage. I just want to emphasize this is not some kind of new technology that is untested, right? This is technology that is saving the bacon for California ratepayers. It is providing the security for the grid. It is reducing costs, not just in California, but also in Texas and much closer to home in New York. When you look at the Ravenwood facility in Queens, you're looking at peaker plants across New York, and really want to credit the work here of the Clean Energy Group, looking at the ability of New York DEC to be moving off peaker plants and rely more and more on energy storage. So when DEP is looking at this permit renewal for Title V, it's imperative that DEP be, and ultimately for Calpine to include this in the permit, but ultimately as DEP as the decider, to ensure that energy storage is a key component. Right. We heard the statistics from the EJ Alliance. Even a 4-hour battery, which is the smallest battery, would have a 41% reduction in emissions. That is kind of the bare minimum, right? There should be a look at investment at obviously at 8 and 12-hour batteries, because that is obviously where the future is going. Those batteries should be augmented by having solar on site, as well as getting rid of the distillate oil. These are the technologies that are best available. These are the technologies that other states are using. And these are the technologies that the Clean Air Act and Title V were designed to use. So it's imperative that Calpine not just do their homework, but go back to the drawing board and not just tout the work from last year, from the last air permit, but to reflect the reality we have right now, to have an air permit that reflects the impact of the EJ law as well as the capability of energy storage. And I'll conclude my comments by saying that the energy storage law was signed into law less than 2 months ago by Governor Murphy, and there's an energy storage program that's currently under comment at the BPU. So New Jersey is also starting to get its act together on energy storage, and Calpine should do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next commenter online, David Pringle. David Pringle?
Sorry, I'm sort of get off mute here.
Ah. We hear you now. No, actually, we can't hear you. You're breaking up a little bit. No.
All right, sorry, I was slow to get off mute. David Pringle. All right, you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. Technology. David Pringle here. I'm on the steering committee with Doug of Empower New Jersey. I'd like to incorporate by reference all the testimony from Doug, both Nikki and Brooke from the Environmental Justice Alliance, Keith from NAACP, Clean Energy Group, the great lawyers from Tishman, Earth Justice, Christian, etc. I'm sorry I got on a little late, so I got on during Nikki's, in the middle of Nikki's testimony, so I heard most of it. I didn't hear the presentation, but from what I've heard from other speakers, it sounds like what we would expect it to be, lots of excuses and asking everybody to just leave Calpine alone. I think I know we need to be diplomatic, but I think if anything, folks are being too diplomatic and too kind to Calpine. The facts are Calpine is polluting an overburdened community. It might not be their intention, but nevertheless, it's the result. And since the last Title V permit, thankfully, the laws have changed. Thank you, everybody who helped get us the New Jersey Environmental Justice Law. That requires Calpine to do better, even better than what you're already required to do and what EPA and DEP requires you to do under Title V, which is Doug very articulately stated. You're not doing and they're not demanding it, but there's now a greater, bigger law, the Environmental Justice Act. You should do better with your permit renewal. You should do it, period. If you don't, the letter of the law is quite clear, and certainly the spirit. DEP can and must require you to do more. All of the conditions that you've heard in the testimony tonight, you should do. And your failure to volunteer to do them, DEP should require you to do them. And I'd like to add an additional one. Appreciate that you say that RNG and hydrogen in your aegis aren't currently viable. I'm glad they're not currently viable, but that doesn't rule out you willing to burn that stuff in the future. And for all the reasons, you shouldn't be burning stuff where Dr. Sheets particularly articulated, you shouldn't be burning RNG or hydrogen. So why don't you volunteer and make as a condition of your permit that you'll never burn anything but traditional natural gas. How about go a step farther and have it be traditionally drilled natural gas and not frack gas? How about go a step even further? I know you already have some solar on the property. How about making a commitment of what's your plan to stop burning stuff and go renewable? We can do this the easy way. You can play ball with us, or we can do it the hard way. Calpine's choice. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next online commenter Madeline Keogh.
Hi, yes, thank you. My name is Madeline Killo. It's spelled Madeleine, last name Killough. And I am an analyst at the Tishman Environment and Design Center at the New School University. Tonight, I will be speaking to the permit renewal application for the Calpine Sherman Avenue Energy Center located in Vineland, New Jersey. So under New Jersey's EJ law and rule, DEP should impose conditions on Calpine's facility that will avoid or minimize the facility's ongoing contributions to adverse environmental and public health stressors, regardless of if Calpine is considered a major contributor in the area. In their EJ impact statement, Calpine said that the renewal of this permit will not result in any additional contribution to stressors in the overburdened community, but this is a separate issue from their obligation to reduce the facility's overall contributions.
I was up in the read arboretum.
Sorry, Doug, I think you're off mute.
Put down. So I was like,
okay, apologies. Sorry, one second. So yeah, in their EJ impact statement, Calpine said that the renewal of this permit will not result in any additional contribution to the stressors in the overburdened community, but this is separate from their obligation to reduce the facility's overall contributions, including from their ongoing operations. Under the EJ rule, permit renewal applicants propose feasible control measures necessary to avoid contributions to all adverse stressors, and where the control measures cannot avoid a disproportionate impact, DEP shall impose conditions to avoid or minimize contributions to these stressors. According to the EJ rule, and as mentioned by my colleague, DEP must do its own evaluation and determination of feasibility on conditions for the Calpine facility's operations, including the control measures that were considered under the technical feasibility analysis and other measures not considered by Calpine. Therefore, we call upon DEP to be critical of Calpine's EJ impact statement due to the fact that Calpine did not adequately consider pollution controls to reduce emissions to the maximum extent technically feasible, or evaluate the incremental costs and relative benefits of the control options that it presented for pollution control, as required by the EJ rule. Calpine's combustion engine was also not examined and should have been, according to the EJ rule, so we call upon DEP to re-examine these parts of Calpine's EJ impact statement. We also recommend implementing battery storage at Calpine's 55-acre facility, as well as on-site solar to charge the batteries with clean and renewable energy as part of a feasible site hybridization plan. Battery storage is the most effective system for reducing emissions at the plant, and with the increase in energy demand that we're seeing and experiencing these days, we can expect the Calpine plant to be running and emitting, excuse my stutter, more than it has in the past. Implementing battery storage with on-site solar would act as an emissions control technology that would reduce local emissions. This would impact EJ communities by replacing fossil fuel combustion directly. According to a 2025 report by the Clean Energy Group, battery storage paired with solar actually does benefit public health by reducing reliance on fossil fuel dependent energy infrastructure, such as oil and gas peaker plants. In New York City, the Peak Coalition also highlighted the role of energy storage projects, including battery storage, in reducing peaker plant emissions that contribute to a disproportionate pollution burden on the neighborhoods that they're located in. Analyses by the Clean Energy Group specific to the Calpine plant in Vineland found that emissions can be reduced up to 73% with larger batteries, but even a system using 4-hour batteries would reduce emissions by 16%. However, as some of my other folks in this call have stated, to ensure localized emission reductions occur, specialized conditions should be imposed. Specifically, the permit should require that the battery is called upon first prior to combustion, and that the batteries are charged from on-site solar first. If the batteries charge from the grid, they must be charged during periods of high renewable energy production. So to conclude, we call upon DEP to impose conditions that will avoid or minimize ongoing contributions from Calpine's facility to environmental and public health stressors, including implementing battery storage and on-site solar at the facility that would directly reduce local emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next commenter is Danny Cooper online.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Danny Cooper, DANNYCOOPER, and I'm a senior litigation assistant at Earth Justice. I also grew up in South Jersey, not too far from Vineland, and have family throughout South Jersey. I've been to Vineland many times over the years, including going to the Delsey Drive-In Theater, which I've learned is only a 2-minute drive and less than a mile away from the facility, and also a place that fills up with lots of people during the summer months when the plant would be running the most. And this is, of course, in addition to the many sensitive receptors previous commenters have mentioned. This distillate oil burning peaker plant is just one of the many facilities and environmental stressors the Vineland community faces. Just in Calpine's block group are a scrapyard, a landfill, a sludge facility, and a piece of the final stretch of Route 55, which is often backed up with short traffic. The accumulation of these sources of pollution in this community goes against the express purpose of the EJ law, and Calpine should take steps to reduce their current emissions. EJ communities in South Jersey and across New Jersey deserve better. Calpine could best reduce their emissions by converting to battery storage, a cleaner and more reliable technology. There's enough space at the facility to convert to battery storage, but Calpine claims it's not feasible because of the long process of securing PJM interconnection. This excuse holds no weight as Calpine already has an existing PJM interconnection and thus would not need to wait the years it claims to get PJM approval to connect battery storage to the grid. In addition, under the EGU rule, Calpine needs to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to a 1,300 pounds of greenhouse gas per megawatt hour emission limit effective June 2027, which is less than 2 years away. Calpine's Aegis does not appropriately consider this upcoming deadline, and if it did, it would see that converting to battery storage would help it meet this limit. It's also important to note that the EGU rules limit will get even stricter in 2030. Though this facility is a peaker plant and does not operate at all times, as other commenters have mentioned, when it does operate, its emissions are especially harmful as gas plants are dirtiest during periods of startup and shutdown. The plant includes a combustion turbine, which burns both natural gas and distillate oil, and that it's not outfitted with the most effective control technology. The turbine's outfitted with water injection to reduce NOx emissions, which ranked 5th and last of the emissions control technologies Calpine considers. Calpine should outfit this turbine with more protective emissions control technology, and at the very least stop the burning of distillate oil in this turbine. The combustion of distillate oil creates particularly toxic emissions, so it's nonsensical for the dirtiest piece of equipment at the facility, the combustion turbine, to have the least protective control technology. Thank you.
Thank you. The next online commenter is Anna Yulsman.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anna, A-N-N-A, Yulsman, Y-U-L-S-M-A-N, and I am a research analyst at the Tishman Environment and Design Center at the New School, where I studied the power sector and environmental justice policy. I was one of the co-authors of the Mandatory Emissions Reductions for Climate Mitigation in the Power Sector report, which analyzed how fossil fuel power plants are disproportionately sited in low-income communities and communities of color across New Jersey and other states. Our research shows that power plants in New Jersey are overwhelmingly located in EJ communities. In fact, 85% of large power plants in the state are in communities where residents are disproportionately people of color and low income. These are neighborhoods that already face elevated rates of asthma, cardiovascular disease, and exposure to multiple sources of pollution. This concentration of power plants is not accidental. It reflects decades of environmental injustice and how industrial facilities have been sited and regulated. The EJ law was designed precisely to address this pattern. Right now, no policy requires localized emissions reductions from power plants in overburdened communities. The EJ rule finally gives DEP that authority and a responsibility to avoid and minimize a facility's ongoing contributions to cumulative environmental and health stressors. The Calpine Sherman Avenue facility is one of the top 3 peaker plants in New Jersey. In its EJ impact statement, Calpine acknowledges that it continues to burn both natural gas and distillate oil. Distillate oil, as others have said, is particularly harmful as it emits higher levels of fine particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and toxic air pollutants, all of which are directly linked to respiratory and cardiovascular harm. These are pollutants that drive the very stressors DEP has identified as adverse in this community. Eliminating oil use would yield real measurable local health benefits. DEP should require Calpine to transition away from oil entirely, but even natural gas combustion is not clean. Gas-fired generation still produces co-pollutants which contribute to localized health risks. For this reason, additional control measures should be taken, such as the integration of battery storage, as others have noted. This approach would align with the EJ rule's mandate to avoid or minimize contributions to adverse stressors in overburdened communities. This permit renewal is not just a procedural step, it is a chance for DEP to demonstrate the strength and purpose of New Jersey's EJ law and to deliver real tangible health benefits to the residents of Vineland. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Next commenter is Gustavo Alcocer.
Yes, hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Gustavo Alcocer, Gustavo, last name Alcocer, pronouns he, him, and I'm coming from 317 Elm Street in Newark from Ironbound Community Corporation. I'm a clean energy project manager there. And I want to start by mentioning what I heard today, that this Calpine plant only runs mainly when electricity demand is high or when there is a grid emergency or for when the grid is unstable, and that you want to provide electric services in a reliable way. And I really like that word, reliability, because for us to create a service that is reliable, we need to consider the dignity and health of people surrounding this area. I am going to expand on some comments about battery storage systems and how I believe that this solution should be deeply considered alongside a photovoltaic system. For short, it's PV system that can ensure that actual clean energy is injected into the grid. As some of other members have commented, by DEP's calculations, Calpine will have to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to meet the upcoming emission limit that goes into effect in June in 2027, and highlighting again that Calpine has not given any indication of what operational changes it will do to meet the limit less than 2 years away, and noting that this emission limit will get even more strict in 2030. Calpine should convert to a hybrid battery storage / PV system to meet this limit. This is what I want to say. And I wanted to lay out the benefits of battery storage systems. And I believe that there's 3 layers here that I wanna focus on. The first layer is that a battery storage system will be able to store electricity in low demand moments, and it will be able to inject electricity into the grid in high demand moments. So this will ensure the reduction of air pollution and the reduction of operation of the plant in high demand moments. And this is very critical because when there are high demand, this is where the plant produces its pollution and what is of biggest concern for us, and which is why this battery storage solution is so is so important for us to understand. And as a second layer, this battery storage system would become a profit-making machine for Calpine, because in the moments that electricity is being injected into the grid when there is high demand, the price of electricity is going to be more valuable. So the price of electricity is going to change depending on whether the electricity is in high demand or low demand, and a battery storage system will be able to do those types of changes, creating profit to Calpine. And as a third layer, the last thing that I want to say is that this emphasis of including a solar energy component is important, because it would ensure that the injected electricity that we're here proposing in high demand, as I just mentioned, this would mean that we would be ensuring that there is clean and renewable energy injected into the grid. And this would also fight this cumulative impact aspect that we're trying to address here. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that, yeah, a battery storage system also consumes electricity because of its inefficiencies that the battery storage system has electrically. So also another second argument for including a photovoltaic system in this solution is for us to cover the actual consumption of electricity that this battery storage system would have. And with that, I finish my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Dawn Davis?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Rachel Davis, RACHEL DAVIS. I'm the full-time public policy and justice organizer for Water Spirit, a spiritual ecology nonprofit focusing on water as the source and sustainer of all life. While based in Monmouth County, we service the entire state. I'm speaking about Calpine Sherman Avenue's Aegis and the facility permit renewal on behalf of our thousands of community members and in solidarity with front and fence line residents. We affirm that clean air, land, and water are sacred rights, not privileges, especially for overburdened communities like this one, where cumulative impacts are undeniable and deeply unjust. We urge full implementation of battery storage and other clean energy strategies, not as optional upgrades, but as necessary interventions in service of life, human and more than human. Battery storage is not just technical, it is moral. It allows us to move away from dirty, deadly fossil fuel and toward systems that honor life rather than extract from it. Let us get our energy from the sun whenever possible. This area in particular, as has been spoken about, Vineland, is burdened by ground level ozone, elevated cancer risk from air toxins, multiple contaminated sites, and emergency planning facilities. These are not abstract data points. They are daily threats to breathing, to drinking, to living. There needs to be alleviation as we plan forward in 2025 onwards in the spirit of the Environmental Justice Cumulative Impacts Law. No additional emissions are negligible. And we should not have fossil fuel plants running more while we are in perpetual drought watch. Hydrogen is extremely water intensive, for those of you who don't know, and dirty frack gas also contaminates air and permanently contaminates water. Any attention lent to these schemes would be wasteful in time and money. And with the climate crisis, always increasingly at our doors, if we're lucky enough to have them, it makes absolutely no sense. We do not have time. New Jersey's environmental justice law was passed precisely because communities like Vineland have suffered disproportionately, and several other communities, as you are already aware, is designated by NJDEP throughout the state. It mandates that facilities proposing new projects in these areas must not just account for their emissions in isolation, they must reduce total emissions to mitigate cumulative harm. This phrase, cumulative impacts, is key, as Dr. Sheets shared at the top of this comment opportunity. We call on decision makers to uphold their duty to protect sacred water and public health long term. No project should move forward unless it contributes to real, measurable reductions in total pollution and protections, the spiritual and physical integrity of water, air, and community well-being. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. We will also share comments in writing.
Thank you. Next, Kevin Barfield.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Barfield. That's Barfield, last name. And I'm Executive Director of Camden for Clean Air, which is a group of environmental grassroots organizations that advocate for clean air and environmental justice in overburdened communities. I'm here tonight to support the community in reference to this particular permit. I think the DEP needs to know and understand, just like Calpine, that the community of violence, the resident violence, need their support in this, and DEP to support and condition this permit. Because there's no existing environmental justice regulation or cumulative impact analysis ordinance for the city. Calpine hasn't changed in their language in their permit, so it would be business as usual. And the residents of Violin, as already have been mentioned, have already been dealing with these combined stressors that have adverse health effects, as has been mentioned, throughout this testimony so eloquently. And although it's good that no additional contributions or to the stressors, as you pointed out, will result in this permit renewal, Calpine, we believe, under the EJ law and rules, has an obligation to reduce their current emissions from their baseline level emissions as they operate in an overburdened community. As is mentioning, startups and shutdowns is very dirty, dangerous, using distilled oil, and which impacts local air quality and community health. The goal should be for Calpine to reduce its overall emissions. And as is mentioned, battery storage implementations and on-site solar generation would definitely reduce that emission. So tonight, Canada for Clean Air wants to recommend that Calpine, Sherman, shift to batteries, which will help improve the emissions under and including their control technology, and convert their facility into a hybrid plant. Hybridization of the plant is feasible to implement battery storage, because they do have the space to do that. The battery storage is the most cost-effective way for them to reduce emission at the plant. And as some numbers have been put out tonight, that the emissions could actually reduce, between 73 to at least 40% in emission. So, and they also need to upgrade their pollution emission control technology. So again, Canada for Clean Air would definitely support for Calpine Sherman to shift to battery, which would meet the DEP's requirement to reduce its greenhouse gas emission limits that goes into effect in 2027. And Calpine should live up to being committed to reducing environmental impacts and being an environmentally good citizen. This would definitely help the residents of Violin to live a healthier and have a safer community. That's my comments.
Thank you. Those are all the online comments. Does anybody else in the room have a comment? No? Okay. We have just a couple minutes till 8 o'clock. There's nothing else in the chat. There are no comments in the chat. If anybody has another comment online, raise your hand. Yes, and just again to remind everyone, we will be continuing to take comments in writing until November 17th. And there'll be a comprehensive response to comment document that will be provided to DEP and made public.
Thank you again for coming out for Sherman Avenue Energy Center public hearing. Thank you.